There is an observation in psychology that speaks quietly but carries great weight. Most people do not notice the exact moment when they begin losing themselves. It does not happen with a dramatic event or a sudden shift. It is silent, gradual, and almost invisible. You may wake up one day realizing you are no longer the person you once imagined you would become. This recognition can feel heavy, unsettling, and frightening, yet it is one of the most common human experiences. In the field of dark psychology, this phenomenon is understood as a process of slow erosion of personal identity. The individual does not simply wake up and decide to give up their authentic self. Instead, the forces around them shape their behavior and values over time. Social pressures, expectations from family and peers, cultural norms, and the need to survive in a competitive world combine to create a powerful current. That current pulls you away from your true sense of self without you even noticing that you are drifting. The ease of losing yourself is connected to how the human brain processes belonging and safety. From early childhood, you are conditioned to adapt. You learn that being accepted by others is necessary for survival. This conditioning is reinforced throughout your life. In school, in work environments, in relationships, the message remains clear. To belong, you must fit in. This is where the hidden danger begins. The more you adjust to meet external demands, the more your original identity fades into the background. Finding yourself, in contrast, is an entirely different process. It is not automatic, and it does not come from merely existing. It requires deliberate effort, painful introspection, and the courage to confront uncomfortable truths. In dark psychology, this difficulty is explained by the brain's natural resistance to change. Humans prefer patterns that feel safe, even if those patterns harm personal growth. Conformity feels easier than authenticity because it minimizes conflict and reduces anxiety in social interactions. Consider how this manifests in daily life. You might choose a career path, not because it aligns with your true passions, but because it promises stability or approval. You might shape your personality to match what is rewarded in your social circle. You might avoid expressing your real thoughts to prevent rejection. Each small compromise may seem harmless in isolation, yet together they create a version of you that barely resembles the person you once were. This is the unseen weight of losing yourself. The psychological cost of this silent erosion is profound. Over time, individuals may develop symptoms of identity crisis, anxiety, and even depression. The absence of a clear sense of self leaves a person vulnerable to manipulation. In dark psychology, this vulnerability is exploited by systems of control, from toxic relationships to corporate structures and political movements. When someone does not know who they are easier to influence. They will follow the loudest voice rather than the quiet truth within themselves. The human need for belonging is both a strength and a weakness. It binds communities together, yet it also allows for mass conformity and collective identity loss. When everyone follows the same patterns, it becomes almost impossible to recognize that something has been lost. In these environments, questioning the status quo feels dangerous. As a result, many people remain unaware that they have already surrendered their sense of self. The tension between losing yourself and finding yourself is at the core of many psychological struggles. The path of least resistance leads toward loss. The path toward authenticity requires effort, discomfort, and resilience. You cannot find yourself by chance. You must seek, examine, and endure the discomfort of seeing who you truly are beneath the layers of expectation and fear. This is why losing yourself feels easier than finding yourself. The forces that push you toward loss are constant, subtle, and socially rewarded. The journey to reclaim your identity is solitary, difficult, and rarely celebrated. Few are willing to begin that journey. Even fewer see it through to completion. The cost of ignoring this reality is profound, as it leaves generations living lives they do not fully understand or truly own. The unseen weight of losing yourself is not only a psychological burden, it is a silent tragedy that shapes societies, influences decisions, and leaves countless individuals wandering through life, without direction. From the moment you are born, there is a subtle narrative presented to you. It tells you that if you simply live your life, you will eventually understand who you are. This cultural myth is repeated in family traditions, in popular media, in motivational messages, and in everyday conversations. It reassures you that identity will unfold naturally as you grow older, as if experience alone holds the key to finding yourself. This idea is comforting because it removes responsibility. It suggests that self-discovery is inevitable, requiring no deliberate effort, no uncomfortable confrontation with inner truth, and no questioning of the world that shaped you. In psychology, however, this belief is deeply flawed. Research on identity formation shows that without intentional exploration and critical thinking, individuals are more likely to internalize external expectations rather than uncover an authentic sense of self. This leads to what is known as identity foreclosure, where a person prematurely commits to roles and beliefs imposed by society without questioning whether those choices truly reflect their core values. Such a process may feel stable, yet beneath the surface it fosters anxiety and disconnection. The myth of natural self-discovery is reinforced by cultural conditioning. Many societies encourage conformity rather than individuality. Children are taught to follow authority, to value approval, and to prioritize collective harmony over personal authenticity. While these teachings maintain social order, they also suppress the curiosity and introspection required for genuine self-discovery. By adulthood, people may confuse the roles they play with their true identity, unaware that they have been shaped more by survival needs than by self-directed choices. This phenomenon is especially evident in modern environments. Social media, for example, rewards presentation over substance. The curated images people share often reflect what they believe others want to see, rather than who they truly are. Careers are frequently chosen based on financial security or social prestige, not personal fulfillment. Relationships are sometimes maintained to avoid loneliness or judgment, rather than built on deep compatibility. Each decision influenced by external approval adds another layer to the false self. Dark psychology explains why this myth is so persistent. When individuals believe they will naturally find themselves, they remain passive. Passive individuals are easier to influence and control. Political systems, corporations, and even personal relationships can exploit this passivity. A person who does not actively search for authenticity is more likely to adopt the values handed to them by those in power. They will rarely question authority or the social structures that guide their behavior, making them compliant participants in systems of control. The human brain also contributes to this illusion. Cognitive biases, such as confirmation bias, lead people to interpret experiences in ways that reinforce existing beliefs, rather than challenge them. If you have been told that living your life will eventually reveal your true self, you are unlikely to question moments of discomfort or identity confusion. Instead, you may assume that clarity will come later, allowing the cycle of passivity to continue. This cultural myth has real psychological consequences. Many individuals reach midlife or later years only to realize they do not truly know themselves. They may feel an unexplained emptiness despite achievements, relationships, and possessions. This crisis often emerges quietly, in moments of solitude, when external validation no longer satisfies. By then, the false self may feel so deeply ingrained that rediscovering authenticity becomes a painful and daunting task. The myth persists because it offers comfort. It tells people they are on the right path, even when they are lost. It prevents them from confronting uncomfortable questions about who they are and why they live as they do. In a world where questioning norms can lead to rejection or isolation, believing in this myth feels safer than facing the truth. Losing yourself rarely begins with a single choice or sudden crisis. It unfolds quietly, shaped by small compromises made over years. Each decision influenced by external pressure leaves a subtle mark on your identity. You adopt certain beliefs to be accepted. You silence personal desires to maintain harmony. and you adjust your behavior to meet the expectations of those around you. Over time, these adjustments accumulate until the person you once imagined yourself to be feels distant, almost unrecognizable. In psychology, this process is often linked to identity diffusion. Identity diffusion occurs when an individual struggles to maintain a coherent sense of self, often due to conflicting roles and external demands. This is not a dramatic breakdown, but a gradual erosion. The person may function well outwardly, excelling in work or relationships, yet internally they feel disconnected. They no longer know what they stand for or what they truly want, which creates a persistent sense of emptiness. Dark psychology explores how this erosion of identity benefits those seeking control. A fragmented self is easier to manipulate. When people lack a firm understanding of who they are more likely to adopt values, opinions, and behaviors dictated by others. This can be seen in group dynamics, where conformity overrides individuality. Social pressure compels individuals to align with the majority, even when it contradicts their inner beliefs. The longer this continues, the more difficult it becomes to separate personal truth from collective expectation. Modern life accelerates this process in subtle ways. Social comparison is constant. Every interaction, especially through digital platforms, exposes you to curated versions of other people's lives. Over time, you unconsciously measure your worth against these projections, adjusting your identity to appear acceptable or desirable. This adaptation may seem harmless, but it creates a disconnect between the authentic self and the image you present to the world. The gradual loss of self also stems from unresolved trauma and unexamined experiences. Early life events, especially those involving neglect or rejection, can lead individuals to suppress parts of their personality to avoid pain. They learn to hide vulnerability and adopt protective personas. These masks, while functional, distance them from authenticity. As years pass, the mask can become indistinguishable from the person wearing it. One of the most concerning aspects of this gradual process is how normalized it becomes. People rarely question their compromises because everyone around them is doing the same. Entire communities operate under shared illusions of identity, reinforcing each other's false selves. This collective blindness is why losing yourself feels so natural. It does not feel like a crisis when it happens to everyone. The psychological impact is significant. Prolonged self-loss can lead to chronic anxiety, depression, and feelings of meaninglessness. Individuals may pursue achievements or relationships, hoping they will fill the void, only to discover that external success does not resolve internal emptiness. This cycle often leads to deeper confusion and despair. Finding yourself requires reversing this process, which is why it feels so much harder. It demands questioning long-held beliefs, examining painful memories, and confronting the possibility that much of your life has been shaped by forces outside your control. This realization can be deeply unsettling, yet it is the first step toward reclaiming authenticity. The longer one avoids this confrontation, the heavier the weight of self-loss becomes. Throughout life, individuals learn to create and wear social masks. These masks are not literal, yet they function as carefully crafted identities designed to secure acceptance and approval. You might display confidence at work while feeling uncertainty inside. You might act agreeable with friends despite holding different opinions. These constructed versions of the self allow smooth interaction with society, but they gradually distance you from authenticity. In psychology, this phenomenon is known as impression management. It refers to the strategies people use to influence how others perceive them. While this behavior is natural and often necessary for survival in social environments, dark psychology highlights the hidden danger. The longer these masks are worn, the harder it becomes to remove them. The individual begins to confuse the mask with their real identity, forgetting what lies beneath. Manufactured identities often originate from external expectations rather than internal values. Cultural standards dictate how success, beauty, or intelligence should appear. Families impose roles on children, encouraging them to live out unfulfilled dreams or uphold traditions. Schools and workplaces reward behaviors that fit established norms, discouraging unique expression. Over time, these influences converge, creating a version of the self built to please others rather than reflect personal truth. Social media intensifies this process. Online profiles or curated performances, carefully selecting moments to project an idealized life. The pressure to maintain this image can be overwhelming. People chase validation through likes and approval, reinforcing the cycle of performance. The digital mask becomes so dominant that the offline self begins to adapt to match it, deepening the divide between authentic identity and public persona. The psychological consequences of living behind masks are significant. Prolonged disconnection from the authentic self leads to identity confusion, emotional numbness, and heightened vulnerability to manipulation. In dark psychology, this vulnerability is exploited by individuals and systems seeking control. Manipulators thrive on inauthenticity because a person unsure of themselves is easier to influence. They can be persuaded to adopt beliefs or behaviors that serve others' interests rather than their own. The challenge of removing these masks is profound. It involves dismantling beliefs formed over decades, confronting fears of rejection, and enduring the discomfort of being truly seen. Many resist this process because the mask feels safer. It provides stability in a world that often punishes difference. However, the cost of safety is high. A life lived entirely through performance eventually leads to a quiet sense of emptiness, a subtle awareness that something essential has been lost. This cycle of wearing and maintaining social masks rarely breaks on its own. It requires deliberate self-examination and the courage to endure vulnerability. Without intervention, the manufactured identity becomes the dominant narrative, leaving the authentic self buried under layers of expectation and fear. Losing yourself is rarely an active decision. It is often an unconscious response to an overwhelming need for safety and belonging. The human brain prioritizes survival over authenticity. It seeks to minimize conflict, reduce social risk, and secure acceptance within a group. This instinct makes it easier to surrender personal truth than to stand alone. Over time, the comfort of conformity begins to feel natural, even necessary. Psychological research shows that humans are wired to seek approval from others. The reward system of the brain releases dopamine when social validation is received. Compliments, agreement, and inclusion activate feelings of safety, while rejection triggers distress. Because of this, people instinctively adapt their behavior to avoid isolation. They suppress parts of themselves that might lead to disapproval, gradually losing touch with their authentic identity. Dark psychology explains how this natural drive for belonging can be manipulated. Systems of power exploit the need for comfort, encouraging individuals to accept roles that maintain order rather than challenge it. Cultural norms, corporate hierarchies, and political structures reward compliance while punishing deviation. This creates a subtle but powerful incentive to abandon authenticity in favor of predictability. The more someone conforms, the more they are praised, and the cycle continues. Modern life intensifies this pattern in ways that are often overlooked. Social media encourages constant comparison and validation seeking. Carefully curated images and narratives present an idealized version of life that pressures individuals to align with unrealistic standards. Rather than exploring who they truly are, people adjust themselves to fit what they believe will gain approval. This pursuit of comfort disguises itself as self-expression, yet in reality it leads further from authenticity. The comfort of losing yourself is deceptive because it provides temporary relief. It shields you from criticism and reduces anxiety in social situations. However, this comfort comes at a cost. Over time, the suppressed parts of your identity create internal tension. The false self cannot meet deeper emotional needs, leading to feelings of emptiness and dissatisfaction. Even when life appears successful from the outside, there is often a quiet sense that something essential is missing. The longer this pattern persists, the harder it becomes to break. Each year spent in conformity strengthens neural pathways that associate safety with self-suppression. This is why finding yourself later in life feels so difficult. It requires unlearning behaviors that have been reinforced for decades. The process demands courage, patience, and a willingness to face discomfort that most people avoid. The appeal of comfort is powerful, but it is also dangerous. It seduces individuals into accepting lives that do not reflect who they truly are. It encourages silence in the face of injustice, compliance in the presence of manipulation, and resignation in the pursuit of meaning. While losing yourself feels easier, it ultimately leaves a void that no amount of external validation can fill. Behind the ease of losing yourself lies a series of forces that operate quietly, yet relentlessly. These forces are not random. They are deeply rooted in the ways human behavior can be influenced, shaped, and controlled. In dark psychology, these forces are studied to reveal how individuals and entire societies can be guided into patterns of thought and action without conscious awareness. Understanding them is essential to recognize why finding yourself feels like an uphill struggle. One of the most powerful forces is conformity pressure. People have an innate desire to align with the group they belong to. This instinct originates from early human history, where survival depended on cooperation and mutual acceptance. In modern settings, this same instinct leads individuals to follow social norms, even when those norms contradict personal beliefs. Studies on groupthink have repeatedly shown how individuals suppress dissenting opinions to avoid conflict. The silent pressure to conform erodes authenticity one compromise at a time. Another force is psychological manipulation, often disguised as persuasion or guidance. Manipulators, whether individuals or institutions, exploit vulnerabilities created by uncertainty in identity. They present themselves as sources of stability and belonging. Through repeated exposure, they shape perceptions and values until the manipulated person adopts beliefs as if they were their own. Gaslighting tactics deepen this control by causing the target to doubt their memory, perception, or judgment, making them even more dependent on the manipulator for validation. Cultural conditioning amplifies these dynamics. From childhood, messages about success, morality, and identity are taught implicitly and explicitly. These messages become internalized, guiding behavior long after their origin is forgotten. For example, a person raised to equate worth with productivity may sacrifice personal happiness in the pursuit of achievement, believing this is their authentic desire. In reality, this belief was planted and reinforced by cultural narratives. Dark psychology also examines how fear operates as a tool of control. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, and fear of isolation drive individuals to abandon authenticity for safety. Authoritarian systems, toxic relationships, and manipulative marketing all exploit this fear. By presenting compliance as the path to security, they ensure individuals remain dependent and hesitant to break free. The digital age adds another layer to these forces. Algorithms analyze behavior, predict preferences, and feed content that reinforces conformity. This subtle feedback loop creates an echo chamber where individuals believe their curated experiences reflect objective reality. Over time, this narrows self-awareness and strengthens external control. The more a person consumes content aligned with manipulated beliefs, the more they internalize those beliefs as their own. These forces are effective because they are largely invisible. Few people recognize when they are being influenced. Even fewer question the origins of their beliefs and behaviors. This lack of awareness is what makes losing yourself so common. Without conscious resistance, identity becomes a product of external influence rather than personal discovery. The impact of these forces is profound. They not only shape individual lives, but also sustain systems of power. A population disconnected from authenticity is easier to guide, predict, and exploit. This reality forms the foundation of many societal structures, from corporate marketing strategies to political campaigns. Understanding this manipulation is not merely academic. It is the first step toward reclaiming control over your own mind and choices. Finding yourself is often described as a journey, yet most people underestimate the difficulty of this process. It is not simply about exploring interests or setting new goals. It requires dismantling years of conditioning, confronting uncomfortable truths, and rebuilding an identity from the ground up. The reason it feels impossible is rooted in both human psychology and the structure of modern life. Dark psychology reveals how external forces actively resist this transformation, because an individual who truly understands themselves is far less susceptible to manipulation. The first barrier lies in the brain's natural preference for familiar patterns. Humans are wired to seek safety in what is predictable. This survival mechanism discourages drastic change. Even when a current situation is unsatisfying, the mind prefers the discomfort it knows over the uncertainty of the unknown. This bias makes the act of questioning deeply held beliefs and roles emotionally exhausting. The search for authenticity requires moving against this ingrained instinct, which feels unnatural and threatening. Another barrier comes from the fear of isolation. Authenticity often disrupts social harmony. When you begin to live according to your true values, you risk conflict with the expectations of family, friends, and society. This can lead to rejection or criticism, experiences the brain interprets as threats to survival. Many people retreat from this discomfort, choosing the false safety of conformity over the pain of standing alone. The longing for connection overrides the pursuit of truth. The challenge is compounded by unresolved trauma and internalized shame. Individuals who have experienced neglect or criticism often silence parts of themselves to avoid reliving pain. Over time, these suppressed parts become foreign. Reconnecting with them requires revisiting memories that are emotionally overwhelming. Without guidance, this process can feel unbearable, causing many to abandon the search before progress is made. Dark psychology studies show how unresolved trauma creates fertile ground for manipulation, as those struggling with inner conflict are more likely to seek external validation. Modern society provides constant distractions that prevent deep introspection. The pace of work, the lure of entertainment, and the endless cycle of digital content all keep attention focused outward. Rarely do people sit in silence long enough to confront who they have become. Even when they do, curated online identities create pressure to present progress rather than pursue genuine growth. This performance of self-discovery can feel rewarding in the moment, yet it delays the real work required to uncover authenticity. The difficulty of finding yourself also stems from the absence of clear markers. Unlike losing yourself, which happens gradually and is reinforced by social approval, self-discovery offers few immediate rewards. Progress is internal and often invisible to others. Without validation, it is easy to doubt whether the effort is worthwhile. The journey becomes a solitary path that demands patience and resilience in a world that values speed and results. Despite these challenges, the process is not hopeless. Awareness of these psychological barriers is the first step toward overcoming them. Recognizing that the struggle itself is a sign of growth can help reframe the experience. Dark psychology teaches that those who endure discomfort and question illusions are far less likely to be controlled by external forces. While the journey to find yourself may be long and painful, it is the only path that leads to authenticity and freedom from manipulation. There is a constant tension between the person you are at your core and the person you are shaped to become. This conflict rarely appears in a single moment. It unfolds gradually as life demands adaptation. Family expectations, professional obligations, and cultural standards guide you toward roles that may not align with your inner truth. Over time, these roles harden into identities that feel permanent, even though they were constructed to serve external demands rather than internal values. Psychology recognizes this as a clash between the authentic self and the false self. The authentic self contains your deepest values, desires, and perceptions. The false self emerges when those inner truths are suppressed to gain approval or avoid rejection. In dark psychology, This conflict is seen as a primary point of vulnerability. The further someone drifts from their authentic self, the easier it becomes for external influences to shape their thoughts and decisions. The modern world amplifies this internal struggle. Social media encourages you to present curated versions of your life, rewarding conformity and punishing deviation from trends. Workplace environments demand constant adaptation to shifting expectations, leaving little room for personal boundaries. Even personal relationships can pressure individuals to compromise identity in order to maintain harmony. Every adjustment feels minor in isolation, but together they create an identity crisis that is difficult to recognize until it becomes overwhelming. This conflict does not remain purely psychological, it manifests physically and emotionally. Chronic stress, anxiety, and fatigue often arise when a person lives in constant dissonance between who they are and who they present to the world. The mind and body react to this disconnect as though it were a threat, releasing stress hormones and heightening emotional sensitivity. This physiological response deepens feelings of confusion and frustration, making authenticity feel even further out of reach. Philosophical perspectives also highlight this tension. Existential thinkers argue that the struggle between authenticity and conformity is central to the human condition. To be truly free, one must confront uncomfortable truths about meaning, mortality, and choice. Most people avoid these questions, finding comfort in routines that distract from deeper reflection. Yet avoiding this confrontation only strengthens the false self and prolongs the conflict. Dark psychology reveals how this internal war can be exploited. Those in positions of influence thrive when individuals remain divided within themselves. A fragmented identity is easier to sway. Marketing strategies, political messaging, and manipulative relationships all leverage this conflict by offering solutions that promise belonging or clarity, while quietly reinforcing dependence on external approval. The more a person seeks outside validation, the more distant they become from their authentic self. Breaking free from this cycle requires a deliberate choice to confront discomfort. It involves recognizing the masks you wear, questioning the beliefs you inherited, and enduring the unease that comes with living honestly. This process is neither simple nor quick, which is why many abandon it. Yet the alternative is a life lived in quiet conflict, where the gap between who you are and who you become grows wider with each passing year. True awareness begins not with comfort, but with disruption. It is the moment you realize that the life you have been living may not be entirely your own. This realization often arrives unexpectedly, triggered by a crisis, a quiet moment of reflection, or a sudden sense of emptiness that cannot be ignored. In psychology, this state is sometimes referred to as an awakening of self-awareness, a turning point where the individual recognizes the distance between their current identity and their authentic core. This awareness is unsettling because it dismantles illusions that once provided stability. The beliefs you inherited from family, culture, and society may no longer feel certain. Roles you accepted without question begin to feel restrictive. Achievements that once seemed fulfilling may feel hollow. This disorientation is not a sign of failure, but an indication of growth. It signals the beginning of a search for authenticity, even if the path ahead feels uncertain. Dark psychology examines why this awareness is both powerful and dangerous. When individuals recognize the extent of their conditioning, they may also realize how easily they have been influenced. This can provoke anger, shame, or disbelief. Manipulators often rely on ignorance to maintain control, so awareness threatens the structures that benefit from compliance. As a result, those seeking authenticity may face resistance from external forces that prefer them to remain passive and unquestioning. The journey from awareness to transformation is neither linear nor easy. Awareness alone does not resolve the conflict between the authentic self and the false self. It often magnifies the discomfort by exposing the depth of compromise. The person begins to see how deeply social masks have been integrated into daily life. Every interaction, every decision may now be questioned. This constant evaluation can feel exhausting, yet it is necessary to begin separating personal truth from imposed identity. Psychological research highlights the value of self-examination. During this stage, practices such as journaling, therapy, and mindful observation allow individuals to identify patterns and triggers that shape their identity. These methods create space to explore personal values without external judgment. However, the process is rarely immediate. It requires patience and a willingness to confront parts of oneself that have been long suppressed, including unresolved trauma and hidden desires. Philosophers argue that true awareness carries moral responsibility. Once you see the forces that shaped you, you cannot unknow them. Ignoring this knowledge is a choice, but so is acting on it. This awareness challenges you to decide whether to continue living according to expectations or to begin crafting a life aligned with authenticity. The weight of this decision can feel overwhelming, yet it also offers the first glimpse of genuine freedom. What makes this stage particularly fragile is the temptation to retreat. Awareness does not promise comfort. It often brings isolation, as few around you may understand or support the process. The false self offers familiarity and ease, while the authentic self demands effort and resilience. Many abandon the search at this point, choosing the illusion of peace over the challenge of growth. Yet those who persist find that awareness, while unsettling, is the foundation of lasting transformation. Reaching the point where you recognize the depth of losing yourself forces a difficult decision. You can continue living in alignment with the roles, expectations, and illusions that have defined your life, or you can begin the arduous process of finding yourself. This decision is not made once. It must be faced repeatedly, in every choice that challenges your comfort and tests your commitment to authenticity. Psychology recognizes this as one of the most significant turning points in personal development, yet also one of the most resisted. Choosing to face yourself means confronting uncomfortable truths. It requires examining how much of your identity has been shaped by cultural conditioning, manipulation, and the silent weight of conformity. It demands that you question long-held beliefs, even those that once felt unshakable. Dark psychology warns that this confrontation is not without consequence. The moment you begin to uncover your authentic self, the systems and relationships that benefited from your compliance may resist your change. Friends, family, and institutions may subtly or openly pressure you to return to familiar patterns, not out of malice but because your growth disrupts the stability of what they know. The journey toward finding yourself also demands patience and resilience. It involves peeling away layers of false identities and confronting the unresolved trauma buried beneath. This process can feel destabilizing, especially when the authentic self has been suppressed for years. There is no guaranteed map, no simple path forward. The discomfort of not knowing who you are can feel heavier than the false certainty of staying lost. Yet every step taken toward authenticity strengthens the ability to withstand external pressures and internal doubt. Remaining lost offers immediate relief. It allows you to maintain harmony with others, avoid painful self-examination, and continue following familiar routines. This path requires no sacrifice, yet it also offers no true fulfillment. Over time, the quiet discontent of living as someone you are not becomes impossible to ignore. Even when masked by success or outward happiness, this discontent manifests as anxiety, numbness, or a lingering sense that something essential is missing. Finding yourself, while more difficult, leads to a different kind of life. It fosters clarity in decisions, resilience against manipulation, and a deeper sense of meaning. The process transforms relationships, not by eliminating conflict, but by grounding them in honesty. It shifts the focus from performing for acceptance to living in alignment with personal values. While the world may not celebrate this transformation, its impact is profound, offering a quiet strength that cannot be easily shaken. The choice between staying lost or facing yourself is ultimately personal. No one can force you to confront the illusions you have carried. No one can dictate when you are ready to begin the search for authenticity. What psychology and philosophy agree upon is that awareness carries responsibility. Once you see the truth, you cannot return to ignorance without cost. Whether you continue or turn back will shape the life you lead from this moment onward. The question is no longer whether losing yourself feels easier. The question is whether ease is worth the price of never truly knowing who you are.